The massive crystal dome of Nexus Prime stretched high above the gathered representatives, its transparent walls showing the swirling colors of distant nebulae. 47 different species filled the circular chamber, their voices creating a symphony of clicks, growls, and melodic tones as they debated the day's most controversial topic. At the center podium, Ambassador Veltar of the Centauri Union waved his forearms dismissively at the holographic display floating before them. The image showed a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star, surrounded by primitive space stations and simple ships that looked like toys compared to the advanced vessels in the chamber. "Look at this," Veltar's voice carried easily through, the translation devices worn by each delegate. "These humans have barely crawled beyond their own star system. Their largest ship couldn't match a single one of our scouts. What possible value could they bring to our great civilization?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The Altarian delegate, Zephyros, stood gracefully on her crystalline legs and added her own thoughts. "Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their weapons are crude projectile launchers and chemical explosives. They still use nuclear power like children playing with fire." More laughter filled the chamber as representatives shared their own observations of humanity's apparent limitations. Some had encountered human trading vessels in the outer systems, small ships carrying basic goods and speaking in halting galactic standard. Others had met human diplomats who seemed perpetually amazed by even simple alien technologies. In the back corner of the vast chamber, far from the main discussion area, an old figure shifted uncomfortably in his hover chair. Kethvar was ancient even by Zelathi standards, his once proud warrior frame now bent and scarred from decades of conflict. 3 clouded eyes watched the proceedings with growing unease, while his gnarled hands gripped the armrests of his chair. The debate continued for another hour, with delegate after delegate rising to speak against human membership in the Galactic Council. They cited humanity's violent history, their tendency toward warfare among their own species, and their apparent technological inferiority. The consensus was clear. Humans might serve as useful laborers or soldiers, but they had no place among the advanced civilizations that guided galactic affairs. Finally, Kethvar could bear no more. The old warrior activated his chair's lift mechanism and slowly rose above the crowd, his voice cutting through the chatter like a blade through silk. "You speak of things you do not understand." The chamber fell silent instantly. Every eye, sensor, and auditory organ turned toward the unexpected speaker. Many of the younger delegates had never heard Kethvar speak during a session. He was known to attend but rarely participate in debates. Veltar looked annoyed at the interruption. "Elder Kethvar, with respect, these humans are clearly primitive. What could you possibly know about them that we do not?" The old Zealothy's scarred face twisted into something that might have been a smile, but carried no warmth. "I know them, because I have fought beside them. 20 years ago, during the Void Wars, when the Devourers came from the dark spaces between galaxies, an uncomfortable stillness settled over the chamber. The Void Wars were not a topic most delegates enjoyed discussing. The Devourers had nearly destroyed 3 entire star systems before they were finally stopped, and the cost in lives had been enormous. Human ships arrived at the siege of Kepler Station. Kethvar continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "We were losing badly. Our combined fleets were being torn apart by creatures that fed on starlight itself. Then came 12 human vessels, not their biggest ships, just patrol craft by their standards." Zephyros made a dismissive sound. 12 ships? What difference could they make against such overwhelming odds? "They turned the tide of the entire battle," Kethvar replied quietly. "But that is not what stays with me after all these years. It was their battle cry that haunts my dreams." He paused, his 3 eyes distant as memories surfaced. "When their ships entered combat, when their soldiers charged into certain death against the Devourers, they did not scream for victory. They did not cry for glory or conquest. Their voices carried one phrase across every communication channel. Remember Earth." The chamber remained silent, hanging on every word. "Remember Earth," Kethvar repeated. "That blue world they came from. The planet they have never allowed any of us to visit. never permitted our scouts to approach, never open to galactic tourism or trade missions. We see their colonies, their outposts, their trading vessels, but Earth itself remains hidden from us. He slowly lowered his hover chair back to its normal height, but his voice carried clearly throughout the dome. You think you know humans, because you have met their diplomats and traders. You believe they are weak because they choose negotiation over conquest. You see their simple ships and assume their technology is primitive. The old warrior's eyes blazed with an intensity that made several delegates step backward. But I have seen what humans become when their people are threatened. I have watched them fight with a fury that made the devourers flee, and I have heard them speak of their homeworld with a reverence that borders on worship. He stood slowly from his chair, leaning heavily on a walking staff that bore the scars of many battles. Listen to me very carefully, because I will say this only once. Never give them reason to wake Earth. That world sleeps peacefully in its distant system, and we should all pray it remains that way. The silence stretched for long moments before nervous laughter began to ripple through the chamber. Several delegates exchanged glances that suggested they thought the old warrior had finally lost his mind to age and battle trauma. But Kethvar was not finished. He raised his staff and pointed it directly at the holographic image of Earth. When you reject their application today, when you turn away their peaceful overtures, remember that you are dealing with a species that chooses restraint. And the most dangerous opponents in the galaxy are those who have the power to destroy you, but choose not to use it. With that warning delivered, the ancient veteran slowly made his way toward the chamber's exit, leaving behind a room full of delegates who were no longer quite as confident in their assessment of humanity. The vote to reject human membership passed overwhelmingly, but Kethvar's words lingered in the air like the echo of distant thunder. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council rejected humanity's application for membership. The decision had barely registered in most political circles, but in the dark war rooms of the hegemony, it had sparked a different kind of interest. Admiral Grexton paced around the tactical display table in the center of Titan Base's command center. His massive frame cast shadows across the holographic star map as he studied the latest intelligence reports. The hegemony had built their power through calculated aggression, expanding their territory by testing the resolve of neighboring species. The humans grow bold, he growled to his assembled officers. 3 new colonies established in the past month, all within our recognized sphere of influence. They act as if the Council's rejection means nothing. Commander Tholek, his second in command, highlighted several systems on the display. Their expansion follows predictable patterns, Admiral. Mining operations, agricultural settlements, research stations. Nothing that suggests military buildup. That's exactly the problem. Grexton slammed his armored fist on the table, causing the hologram to flicker. They show no respect for our territory, no fear of our fleets. It's time to remind them of their place in the galactic order. The other officers nodded in agreement. The hegemony had maintained their power through demonstrations of strength, swift strikes that left their enemies demoralized and compliant. It was a strategy that had worked for decades across dozens of worlds. "What do you propose, sir?" asked Captain Zorath, the base's tactical specialist. Grexton zoomed the display to focus on a single system. Luna Colony, Earth's oldest off-world settlement, strategically important but lightly defended. Intelligence reports show only a small security force and basic defensive systems. Tholek studied the data scrolling beside the lunar base. Population of approximately 12,000, mostly miners and their families. The colony supplies rare minerals to Earth's manufacturing centers. Perfect, Grexton's predatory smile revealed. Rows of sharp teeth. We conduct a lightning raid, destroy some infrastructure, take a few hundred prisoners. When Earth comes begging for negotiations, we dictate terms that establish clear boundaries for their expansion. The plan was simple and had worked countless times before. A quick show of force, minimal casualties, maximum psychological impact. The humans would learn to respect hegemony authority, and other species would see the consequences of defying their territorial claims. "How many ships do we deploy?" asked Zorath. 12 warships should be more than sufficient, Grexton replied. We're not trying to conquer the system, just send a message. Fast in, fast out, minimal resistance expected. The attack came at dawn, Luna time. 12 hegemony vessels dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their sleek hulls gleaming in the light of the distant sun. The colony's early warning systems triggered immediately, but there was little the small security force could do against such overwhelming odds. Captain Park Soo-jin commanded Luna's defense force from the colony's main control center. His 6 patrol craft were already launching, but he knew they stood no chance against hegemony warships. Each enemy vessel was 3 times the size of his largest ship and carried weapons that could level entire city blocks. Get me Earth Command, he ordered his communications officer while watching the tactical display. Priority Alpha transmission. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than 30 minutes. The human patrol craft fought bravely but were quickly overwhelmed by superior firepower. Mining facilities erupted in flames as hegemony weapons carved through their structures like paper. The colony's main power grid failed, plunging entire sections into darkness. Then came the landing. Ships. Hegemony soldiers moved through the colony with practiced efficiency, gathering civilians in the main plaza. Families were separated from their belongings, children crying as they were herded toward the transport vehicles. The soldiers were not unnecessarily cruel, but they were thorough. Lee Min-ho, the colony's chief administrator, stood defiantly before Admiral Grexton as the hegemony commander toured the conquered settlement. You have no right to be here. This is human territory, recognized by the Galactic Council. The Council rejected your species' application for membership, Grexton replied calmly. You have no standing in galactic law. This territory now falls under hegemony protection. Protection? Lee's voice cracked with anger. You're destroying our homes and kidnapping our people. I'm teaching your species a lesson about respect. Grexton turned away dismissively. Load the prisoners and prepare for departure. 847 human civilians were forced aboard the hegemony. Transports. Men, women, and children from all walks of life. Their only crime being in the wrong place when the hegemony decided to make an example of their species. As the last transport lifted off from Luna's surface, Captain Park transmitted his final message to Earth. Static filled the communication lines, but his words came through clearly. This is Luna Colony. We are under attack. The hegemony has taken our people. 847 souls. Remember us. 18 hours later, every hegemony vessel in the task force received the same transmission. It came on all frequencies simultaneously, broadcast in perfect hegemonic language with no trace of accent or translation error. This is Earth Command. You have 72 hours to return our people unharmed to Luna Colony. Comply with this demand, and we will consider this incident a tragic misunderstanding. Refuse and you will face consequences. You have been warned. This message will not be repeated. Admiral Grexton read the transmission twice before breaking into laughter. His officers joined in, the sound echoing through the command center of his flagship. 72 hours, he gasped between laughs. What will they do, file a complaint with the Council? Send angry diplomatic messages? Commander Tholek wiped tears from his eyes. Should we respond, sir? No need, Grexton waved dismissively. Let them waste their time with empty threats. In 3 days, they'll come crawling with offers of tribute and territorial concessions. The hegemony fleet continued on its course, carrying their human prisoners toward the processing centers where they would be held until Earth's inevitable surrender. None of them noticed the small objects that had begun moving in the asteroid belt, or the communication signals passing between seemingly empty points in space. The 72-hour countdown had begun. Deep beneath the frozen wasteland of Siberia, 3 kilometers below the surface where no satellite could detect it, Admiral Park Hyun-woo stood in a chamber that officially did not exist. The room stretched for hundreds of meters in every direction, filled with control stations that had remained dark and silent for over 2 decades. The walls were lined with massive displays, each one showing a different section of human space. But these were not the simple trade routes and colony maps that other species had seen. These screens revealed the true extent of humanity's presence in the galaxy. A network of hidden installations and concealed fleets that no alien government suspected. Park's weathered hands moved across control surfaces that had not been touched since the end of the Void Wars. His fingers found the sequences from memory, muscle memory preserved from the last time Earth had been forced to reveal its true nature. The displays came to life one by one, showing status reports from facilities scattered across dozens of star systems. 68 hours remaining, reported Lieutenant Commander Kim So-young from her station. All Ghost installations are responding to activation codes. Park nodded grimly as he watched the awakening begin. Signal all sleeper commands. Protocol 7 is now in effect. Across the solar system and beyond, objects that had drifted silently through space for years suddenly blazed with power. What had appeared to be simple asteroids revealed themselves as carefully camouflaged military bases. Mining platforms that had operated openly for decades shed their civilian disguises and emerged as fortress-class battle stations. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, Facility Bravo 7 had masqueraded as a routine mineral extraction operation for 15 years. Its workers had genuinely believed they were mining iron and nickel from the ancient rocks. They had no idea that their drilling operations had hollowed out massive chambers deep within the asteroid. Chambers now filling with the bulk forms of ships that had waited patiently in the dark. Captain Cho Jin-woo received his activation orders while reviewing the day's mining reports. The message appeared on his personal terminal, encoded with security protocols he had hoped never to see again. His hands shook slightly as he entered his command codes and watched his office transform around him. The walls slid away to reveal the true command center of one of humanity's most advanced military installations. Display screens showed the positions of over 40 capital ships, each one larger than anything the hegemony had ever built. These vessels had been constructed, in secret, their existence known only to a handful of people in Earth's military command. All ships report ready for deployment, his tactical officer announced. The young woman had been living a double life for years, training as both a mining engineer and a fleet commander. Dreadnought-class vessels are moving to launch positions. Similar, scenes played out across human space. Research stations revealed weapon arrays that could crack planets. Deep space telescopes unfolded into communication hubs that coordinated fleets across impossible distances. Even the seemingly peaceful agricultural colonies showed their hidden nature, their grain silos opening to launch surveillance drones that had been watching alien movements for decades. On Earth's moon, what tourists had always assumed was an old mining complex suddenly came alive with activity. The Luna Command Center had been built into the moon's core, its existence masked by the ruins of humanity's first lunar colonies. Now its true purpose became clear as massive elevator systems brought warships up from the depths, ships so large they had never been intended to land on planetary surfaces. Admiral Park watched the deployment from his underground command center, each ship's emergence marking another piece of humanity's careful preparation. These vessels represented decades of secret construction, resources diverted from civilian projects and hidden in budgets that no alien observer had ever questioned. "Sir," Kim So-young's voice carried a note of awe despite her years of training. "Ghost Fleet Alpha is reporting full deployment. 127 capital ships, all systems operational." "Ghost Fleet Beta?" Park asked. 89 ships ready. Ghost Fleet Gamma shows 96 vessels standing by. The numbers continued to climb as installations across human space reported their readiness. Ships that had been built in the darkness, between worlds, constructed using technologies that humanity had developed but never openly displayed. These were not the simple vessels that alien diplomats had observed in human ports. These were warships designed by a species that had learned hard lessons during the Void Wars. 12 hours before the hegemony deadline expired, their long-range sensors detected the first movement. Admiral Grexton stared at his tactical display, with growing confusion as new contacts appeared on his screens. "Where did they come from?" he demanded of his sensor operator. "These readings show massive ships, but our intelligence indicated humans possessed maybe 50 capital vessels." "Sir?" The operator's voice cracked with uncertainty. I'm reading over 300 contacts, and they're not following standard fleet formations. They're moving in perfect coordination across multiple star systems. Grextan felt the first stirring of unease in his chest. The human fleet wasn't just large, it was moving with a precision that suggested technology far beyond what his species possessed. These ships appeared and disappeared from sensors at will, traveling at speeds that should have been impossible. Get me intelligence command, he ordered. I want to know where these ships have been hiding. But there was no time for answers. The human fleet was already moving through space like a coordinated organism, each ship taking its position in a formation that stretched across light years. They moved with purpose and terrible certainty, closing the distance to hegemony space with each passing hour. On the bridge of the flagship ECS Incheon, Admiral Park studied the tactical display showing enemy positions. His ship alone was larger than most space stations, its hull containing weapon systems that could sterilize entire worlds. Around him, the greatest military force humanity had ever assembled moved toward its target. All fleets report ready, Commander Lee Jun-ho announced from his position. We have 43 hours until the deadline expires. Park nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the display. Signal all commands. Operation Remember Luna is authorized. Let them see what they have awakened. In the depths of space, humanity's true strength revealed itself at last. The human fleet moved through space like a surgical blade, each ship positioned with mathematical precision. Admiral Park Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of the ECS Incheon, watching as his forces approached hegemony territory. The massive dreadnought stretched for over 3 kilometers, its hull bristling with weapons that could level cities, yet it moved through space with the grace of a dancer. Tactical analysis complete, reported Commander Lee Jun-ho from his station. Enemy forces are concentrated around 7 major installations. Total opposition estimated at 400 ships. Park studied the holographic display floating before him. The hegemony had built their empire through brute force, their fleets designed to overwhelm smaller opponents through sheer numbers and firepower. But humanity had learned different lessons during the Void Wars, lessons about precision and efficiency. Target priority is the rescue of our people, Park announced to his bridge crew. All military installations are secondary objectives. I want full evacuation warnings sent to civilian populations before any strike. The first engagement began at the outer edge of hegemony space, where a patrol fleet of 30 enemy ships moved to intercept the advancing humans. Admiral Grextan watched from his command center as the battle unfolded on his tactical screens, expecting to see the familiar pattern of ship-to-ship combat. Instead, he witnessed something that defied everything he understood about space warfare. The dear human ships simply vanished from his sensors. One moment they were there, clearly visible on every display, and the next they had disappeared completely. For several minutes, the hegemony patrol fleet searched empty space, their commanders reporting no contacts on any frequency. Then the humans reappeared, but they were no longer where they had been. The enemy vessels materialized behind hegemony lines, their weapons already firing with devastating accuracy. Each shot was perfectly placed, targeting weapon systems and engines while leaving life support and crew quarters intact. Within minutes, the entire hegemony patrol fleet was disabled, their ships drifting helplessly in space while emergency beacons called for rescue. Not a single vessel had been destroyed, but all were completely unable to fight. How are they doing this? Grextan demanded of his tactical officer. Our sensors show nothing, then they appear exactly where they want to be. Unknown, sir, came the shaken reply. Their technology appears to be decades ahead of anything in our databases. The pattern repeated itself across 7 star systems as human forces moved toward their objectives. Hegemony fleets found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. Ships that could strike from impossible angles before vanishing again into empty space. At Titan Base, where the human prisoners were being held, Commander Tholek received reports of the advancing fleet with growing panic. Sir, they've neutralized our outer defenses without destroying a single ship. They're disabling everything with surgical precision. Captain Choi Min-ji led the rescue operation at Titan Base, her assault ship materializing directly above the prison complex. But instead of immediately attacking, she broadcast a message on all frequencies in perfect hegemonic language. Attention Titan base personnel. We are here to retrieve our people. You have 5 minutes to evacuate all non-essential areas. We will provide transport for any civilians who require assistance. Tholek stared at his communications display in disbelief. They're offering to help evacuate our people while attacking our base? The human assault began exactly 5 minutes later, but it was unlike anything the hegemony had experienced. Instead of the destructive bombardment they expected, human forces used weapons that seemed designed to minimize casualties. Blast doors were sealed shut to protect fleeing personnel. Life support systems remained untouched. Even the base's medical facilities continued operating normally. Within an hour, the 847 human prisoners were free, but the hegemony defenders found themselves treated with the same care. Wounded soldiers received medical attention from human medics. Captured officers were provided with food and comfortable quarters. The entire operation seemed designed to demonstrate that humanity could destroy their enemies, but chose not to. The systematic dismantling of hegemony. Military power continued across 12-star systems. At each installation, the same pattern emerged. Human forces would appear without warning, disable all resistance with minimal damage, evacuate enemy personnel to safety, and then methodically shut down military operations. Young Private Yu Sang-ho found himself assigned to escort hegemony prisoners to temporary shelters. One of the captured officers, a veteran soldier named Kekstar, looked at him with confusion. "Why do you spare us?" the alien asked through his translation device. "We attacked your colony. We took your people. By the laws of war, you could execute us all." You thought about the question for a moment before answering. "Because we are not like you. We do not fight for conquest or glory. We fight to protect our people and end threats. Killing you would not achieve either goal." The alien stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I begin to understand why the old warrior warned us about your kind." Within 48 hours of the deadline's expiration, the hegemony's military capacity across 12 systems had been completely neutralized. Not destroyed, but rendered completely ineffective. Their ships were disabled, their bases shut down, their personnel safely evacuated and held in comfortable conditions. From the bridge of the Inshan, Admiral Park broadcast a message that reached every inhabited world in hegemony space. "This is Admiral Park Hyunwoo of Earth Command. Our people have been returned safely to Luna Colony. We have demonstrated our capabilities and our restraint. The hegemony's military forces in this region have been neutralized. We are not conquerors. We do not seek territory or tribute, but we are protectors, and we remember those who harm our people." He paused, looking out at the stars through the bridge's main viewport. "Surrender now, and your people will be treated with the dignity we afford all sentient beings. Continue this conflict, and you will discover that what you have seen is only the beginning of our capabilities." Admiral Grexton sat in his darkened command center, surrounded by the wreckage of his military ambitions. Every ship in his fleet was disabled. Every base under his command had been neutralized. His prisoners were being fed better meals than his own officers had enjoyed. With trembling hands, he activated his communication system and broadcast the words that would end the hegemony's expansion forever. "This is Admiral Grextan. The hegemony surrenders unconditionally. We request immediate negotiations." The war was over before most of the galaxy even realized it had begun. 1 week after the hegemony's surrender, the crystalline dome of Nexus Prime buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from every major species had gathered for an emergency session of the Galactic Council, but the usual confident chatter was replaced by whispered conversations and worried glances. The holographic displays that ringed the chamber showed footage from the recent conflict, images that had shaken the foundations of galactic politics. Massive human warships appearing from nowhere, entire enemy fleets disabled in minutes, and most disturbing of all, the complete restraint shown by forces that could have easily conquered half the galaxy. Ambassador Veltar sat in his usual position, but his forearms trembled slightly as he reviewed the intelligence reports. His species had dismissed humanity as primitive just months ago, yet the evidence before him suggested a military capability that surpassed anything the Centauri Union possessed. "The numbers don't make sense," he muttered to his aide. 300 capital ships, where were they built? How did our intelligence networks miss something this massive? Similar conversations echoed throughout the chamber as delegates struggled to understand what they had witnessed. The systematic dismantling of hegemony military power had been broadcast across the galaxy, but the implications were only now beginning to sink in. At the back of the chamber, Kethvar sat quietly in his hover chair, his three eyes watching the proceedings with a mixture of sadness and grim satisfaction. The old warrior had tried to warn them, but his words had fallen on deaf ears. Now they would learn the truth the hard way. Council Speaker Mordain called the session to order, her melodic voice carrying easily through the vast space. "We have gathered to address the recent events involving the human species and the Hegemony Coalition. Before we begin formal discussions, Elder Kethvar has requested permission to address the assembly." A murmur of surprise rippled through the chamber. The ancient Zelathi rarely spoke during council sessions, and never had he requested formal speaking time. All eyes turned to the scarred veteran as he slowly activated his chair's lift mechanism and rose above the crowd. "I tried to warn you," Kethvar began, his gravelly voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. 3 months ago, I stood in this very room and told you that you did not understand what you were dealing with. You laughed at the words of an old soldier. The silence was complete now, every delegate hanging on his words. The footage of human, military might still played on the displays around them, a constant reminder of how wrong their assumptions had been. "You believed humans were primitive because you saw their merchants and diplomats," Kethvar continued. "You thought they were weak because their ships looked simple, their technology appeared basic, but you were seeing only what they chose to show you." He gestured toward the tactical displays showing human fleet positions. "For 20 years since the end of the Void Wars, humanity has been preparing. Not for conquest, not for expansion, but for the protection of innocence. They have been watching threats that we cannot even imagine, building defenses against dangers we refuse to acknowledge." Ambassador Zephyros of the Altarian Collective shifted uncomfortably in her crystalline seat. How could they hide such capabilities from our intelligence services? "We have treaties, trade agreements, diplomatic exchanges." "Because they are not like us," Kethvar replied simply. "We build weapons to conquer. We develop technology to dominate. Humans create these tools to protect, and they understand that the best protection comes from enemies who never know the extent of your capabilities." The old warrior's chair descended slowly as he prepared to deliver his most important words. "You thought they were weak because they choose peace over war. You believed they were inferior because they negotiate instead of attack. You could not comprehend that their greatest strength lies in knowing when not to use their power." Council Speaker Mordain leaned forward in her chair. "What are you saying, Elder? That humanity has been deceiving the entire galactic community?" "Not deceiving," Kethvar shook his head. "Protecting. Every human colony you have visited, every trade ship you have encountered, every diplomatic mission you have hosted, these are real. These people genuinely want peace and cooperation, but behind them, watching from the shadows, stand the Guardians." He pointed to the footage showing human forces evacuating hegemony civilians before striking military targets. "Look at how they fight. They could have destroyed every enemy ship, conquered every enemy world, enslaved every enemy population. Instead, they disable threats, protect innocents, and treat prisoners with dignity. They are not conquerors. They are the galaxy's immune system." The chamber erupted in discussion as delegates began to understand the implications. If humanity possessed this level of military capability, while consistently choosing restraint, what did that mean for the balance of galactic power? "The question before us," Kethvar continued, raising his voice above the chatter, "is not whether we should fear humanity. The question is whether we deserve their protection." Ambassador Veltar stood slowly, his earlier confidence completely gone. You're saying they see themselves as our guardians? Without our consent or knowledge? I'm saying they have been protecting us whether we deserved it or not, Kethvar replied. The Devourer incursions that stopped at the edge of our space 20 years ago, they didn't just disappear. The pirate fleets that mysteriously vanished from the Outer Rim, they weren't destroyed by random accidents. The plague ships that never reached populated worlds, someone has been watching, someone has been acting, and we never knew. The truth settled over the assembly like a heavy blanket. For decades, they had assumed their civilization's safety came from their own military might and diplomatic skills. Now they learned that humanity had been the silent guardian, the watchful protector that kept the truly dangerous threats at bay. Council Speaker Mordain called for order as the discussion threatened to become chaotic. The immediate question remains, what is humanity's status within our galactic community? The vote was unanimous, but for very different reasons than anyone had expected months earlier. Humanity's application for galactic citizenship was approved, but now the Council understood the true relationship. They were not gaining subjects or even equals. They were being formally recognized by their protectors. As the session ended and delegates filed out of the chamber, Kethvar remained behind, watching the displays that still showed human fleets, withdrawing to their hidden positions. The ships were already beginning to disappear, fading back into the darkness between stars as if they had never existed. In the depths of space, Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the Incheon as it powered down its combat systems and prepared to return to its long sleep. The massive dreadnought would soon be just another asteroid in the belt, waiting patiently for the next time it was needed. "Orders, sir?" asked Commander Lee Jun-ho. Park smiled as he looked out at the stars, the blue light of distant Earth visible through the viewport. "We go home. We sleep. We watch. And we remember why we do this." Earth continued its orbit around the sun, a peaceful blue world that had once again proven that the greatest strength often comes from those who choose not to use it. The galaxy slept safer knowing that somewhere in the darkness humanity kept its vigil.